Hello and welcome to the Success Catalyst, where you build your dreams episode by episode. I'm Nina Robert, and I'm super excited about my guest today, Monique Fields. Monique is a podcast host, a 10x business coach, a speaker, and a mentor. She's also a certified life coach and personal transformation trainer. Monique is skilled in facilitation, training, coaching, project leadership, and community engagement. With integrity, enthusiasm, and inspiration, Monique supported school and community leaders to achieve their goals. She continues to support leaders to confidently crush their personal and organizational goals. Welcome, Monique. It's really a great pleasure to have you with me today.
Thank you so much, Nina, for having me.
Well, to start with, can you tell us more about what you do? You're doing many amazing things, as I can say. So tell us more.
Okay, so currently I am, as you shared, providing business coaching and personal coaching for individuals. And as you also shared in my intro, this is due to my background in education. I was an educator for 24 years. I taught in the classroom for 14 of those years and was outside of the classroom for 10, an assistant principal and a principal for a total of 9 years. So I have done quite a lot of leadership and community engagement. And having decided to become a coach, sort of related to some of the things that I wanted to know more about and to problem solve as a leader myself, I have gotten into the work of business development and, personal coaching with leaders who are still working in schools and who are leading their own businesses and needing some partnership as they work through challenges. So I have been a problem solver my whole life, and kind of what lights me up is getting into the nitty gritty of things. And I think this is just a perfect spot that I have stumbled into. Really interesting the way I stumbled into this. It was during the last few years of my leadership, I would say, when I became a principal, that I started to seek very seriously, more than I had in the past, personal development options that would go beyond the personal and professional development options that I was being offered as a part of my district training. So, this is what brings me to have this sort of combination of tools and experiences that you shared.
Wow, that's an amazing journey. And I believe all success stories, or at least most of them, come with a challenge or at least a life lesson or something valuable that you learn within that journey. So is there such a lesson that you've learned?
For sure. I think people will recognize this cliche, or perhaps they may not. I don't know how common it is. But I heard something recently that sort of resonated with exactly what I experienced, as I was a very passionate educator early on. Actually, what brought me to be an educator is that I had so few of the total number of teachers in my entire experience who really had what I would describe as a life-changing impact on me, that I wanted to join the profession to be among the individuals who was very kid-centered and focused primarily on helping the children identify their gifts and learn what their strengths and powers were. So I was sort of in it, like many people are, to change lives, but I wanted to sort of tip the balance toward the individuals who deeply cared about students in the way that I remembered wanting to be cared for as a child. Getting into education that way, I was very compelled to impact and make a difference for children, to help them find motivation and interest in learning. And every year that desire grew. I had originally said I did not want to be an administrator, that was not something that I ever wanted to do. And it's funny how they say never, right? Like, that ended up calling to me. And the reason was not because I wanted to be in charge of, a staff or to run a school. It was actually that I wanted to have a greater impact. I was looking for a way to reach, to encourage, and to uplift more than the 20 to 30 students that I was being assigned at a time. And at first I was satisfied being a team leader. because I was having an opportunity to collaborate with other members of my team and influence
Mhm.
what was happening with all of the children on a grade level. But, sometimes people talk about being power hungry. I would say that that happens in both positive and negative ways. That in the positive way, my desire to reach more children, it just continued to grow, to continue to grow. But one of the biggest sort of underestimations I made was this phrase: what got you from point A to point B is not necessarily what will take you from point B to point C. And I will be fully transparent and say that I had very, very good training. I would say among, the best training. And similar to what a lot of people experience, when you are learning the theory of education, it is very different from the application in the classroom. The same is true of leadership. Learning the theory um, does not exactly pay, as I've heard it, the price of admission as it comes to doing the actual work. And it was a very, very big job. I think often underestimated from people who look out on who look in from the outside and obviously doing the role. The only way to really understand how large the responsibility is to be standing in the shoes of somebody who's doing the job. And man, talk about being surprised, very
Mhm.
resilient, determined, working hard. The challenge that I faced was that I took my adamant determination that I had always used. I had always been something of like a teacher workaholic, staying at school until 6 and sometimes 9, dreaming up crazy projects, carrying things back and forth home with me. Those things did not serve me well when I took on the leadership role, because I was extremely brave and willing to carry far heavier a load than any one person ever should. And it caught up with me in the end. So that was a pretty big setback, and I would say tough lesson that I
Mhm.
experienced, that the way that I had been carrying myself as a teacher was not practical in terms of taking on that tremendous organization-wide leadership responsibility as the leader of a school.
Wow, that's amazing. And with such a lesson, do you think you would have done things differently if you started your journey with your expertise and knowledge that you have now?
Yeah, so a part of what sent me out seeking other tools, strategies, methodologies and ways to kind of manage stress, pressure, work demands, competing demands, and all of those things, I absolutely would have done some things differently.
Mhm.
And it's a part of the work that I do now to make sure that people are equipped and having accountability and partnership to be sure that they are implementing and leading in a way that allows them to maintain the resource that they have inside, right? Like
Mhm.
to serve with all of the passion, the drive, and the commitment that they have for this area that they're working in, but not empty themselves out completely. If I had it to do over again, I would absolutely go back in this respect and implement some of the practices that I now teach people that I'm 100% certain would have, made my path look a little bit different, as I'm seeing it make the path look different for some of my clients. That's not to say that I would change the past. I feel like the experiences that I had absolutely are the reason why I've learned and am now equipped with tools that can help many other people. So I don't regret the way the path took me. But if there were a magic wand, I probably would go back and start implementing some of the practices that I teach
Mhm.
so that I could perhaps stay engaged. I know my older self envisioned doing that job for 30, 35, maybe 40 years. I thought I was going to teach and lead in the formal, sense forever. So, yeah, if I could wave a magic wand, I bet my brain would say, yes, let's go back and make it perfect so that we could do it again forever. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I love your perspective because it's true that we sometimes think that, oh man, if I had knew that before, I would have done things much differently and things would have been much easier than they have been. But still, we have to look back with compassion and gratitude because what we've learned and what we've become today and all the knowledge that we acquired, all the lessons and the mistakes are just part of the journey and part of the fun.
hmm They absolutely help us become who we are. One of the great exercises that I am thankful, as you said, with gratitude that I've experienced is literally taking the practice of looking back at a hardship. And I have some very interesting stories that I could tell about what it means to lead. I think anyone who is in a position of leadership or ownership wherever they work can relate that sometimes you encounter stories that you really wish were not a part of your history, but
Mm-hmm.
really genuinely being able to look back at those things and think about what happened. And of course, all of the negative things flood to mind immediately. But what I have found that is genuinely the most fun is to continue listing what came out, what were the outcomes of that particular hardship. And at some point, you are going to be able to list some positive consequences that you experienced as a result of it. And when you can continue to list the positive consequences, it has the effect that it will let you access gratitude, sincere gratitude for what was the result of that thing that you would normally phrase as a hardship. So now the word hardship or, challenge, I think
Mm-hmm.
this is where people come from when they call them opportunities, because there is so much beauty very often that we come away from difficult times with. Like in my case, resilience. And, people talk about developing a thick skin. But one of the biggest lessons that I learned from, you know, um, persecution, criticism, unjust treatment is the value that I should not be taking action solely based on what other people think, right? That just the sort of calm acceptance that very often people have agendas that are theirs and not yours, and really not what you should be guided by, reacting to, or responding to. And I think that's a really important lesson that you hear about in
Mm-hmm.
terms of leadership, but you don't really know until you're in the middle of the situation. And of course, you're concerned about what everybody thinks and what they're saying. And it's a type of professional maturity when you can get to the place that you really just accept that they have the position that they have and are not deeply affected by it. So just another example of how beautiful it is to learn, grow, and actually be grateful for some of the challenges that we get to experience.
I love what you call professional maturity. That is not
hmm
obvious, and that is not accounted by the number of years of experience that someone has. Because professional maturity and the fact that you mentioned responding and reacting, it's all about widening the perception and using this perception as a mental skill, as a mental muscle that you can widen, sharpen, and use as a tool. Like whenever you're having a conversation with someone, just always keep in mind that they have a different perspective than yours. They're probably not even seeing the same colors as yours. So why
hmm
do you expect them to have the same way of thinking, of seeing things? That's so such a valuable advice. So thank you, Monique. And you mentioned before when we first spoke that you practice staying in sync with yourself and
hmm
practicing noticing. So what do you do on a daily basis to do such practice?
So the first thing that I want to do is just share a teeny tiny context for why this is so important to me. Um, I could say that prior to being in leadership, in my early experience, I was much more in tune with myself by default. I was single. I did not have children. That's not to say I was the only one who mattered. I had family members, loved ones, relationships, right? But on a day-to-day basis, as a relatively young adult, my life was simple. I would say that as I transitioned into motherhood and leadership, almost exactly at the same time, which was pretty interesting, um, I had a little bit of a disruption that I didn't notice that shifted the amount of attention that I was paying to
Okay.
who I am and the state of being that I choose.
Mhm.
And at the pace that I made those two transitions, again, almost simultaneously, I didn't realize how it was slowly turning this focus from my inner world and my individual state of being to a preoccupation with everybody else's.
Mhm.
I originally framed that as like committed service and devotion that was honorable. And I don't think that it wasn't honorable to be almost entirely, like if you could make a pie, somewhere up over 80% focused on what is going on with everyone else, family, friends, and in my work environment, which I've already described, the number of pockets of people that you serve when you're the leader of a school, the children, the teachers, the community, the parents, the district leaders, so many different places. I absolutely lost sight until circumstances caused me to stop, to pause, to recognize that I don't remember who I am in this anymore. There is no time or space for me. And my first reaction was to be looking for someone other than me to attend to me and to be spending time in resentment and disappointment about who outside of me wasn't concerned about me. And nobody cared about my quiet temper tantrum. So I had to get over that and accept and realize that it was my responsibility to attend to myself. And we've heard this phrase, if you don't love you, how can you expect other people to do that, right?
Right.
So it was a sort of tough reality because I had to deal with this sort of false idea that I carried that in some way I was helping everybody else by sacrificing myself, which was the opposite of the truth and not to my own or anyone else's benefit. But once I kind of had that exchange with me and accepted responsibility for me and also came to terms and made peace with the idea that I was not, failing to serve others in any way by taking care of and attending to myself, then I started to notice the patterns that I was creating, the thoughts that I was just letting, run on autopilot, things that we sort of automatically assume to be true, that we have to carry responsibility for everything, that it's our job. Like this is a common thing for high achieving professionals to be telling yourselves, it's my job, it's my responsibility. If nobody else will do it, I will do it, that sort of thing. And just doing the simple practice, like you said, about being in sync with yourself, right? Taking just a moment to ask, but is this in alignment with who I am, what I believe, what I represent, the way I want to show up in the world? Or perhaps, is this thing that I'm telling myself I must do in alignment with what is really important to me, what I value and what I prioritize? And when the answer is no, then perhaps we're telling ourselves something that doesn't have to be true as it relates to, I must do this job. Such a simple practice, but it absolutely was liberating for me because it highlighted that I was taking on far more responsibility than I needed to for the world, far more responsibility than was healthy for one individual to carry in terms of the world around me. So it was very empowering and a practice that I'm so grateful was introduced to me, which really started with just noticing my thinking and asking one of my favorite questions. When an automatic thought runs in my mind, I am good now at noticing it and seeing it, just seeing it, not saying that's good or bad or shame on you and packing it down like sometimes we're trained to do. Noticing that thought and saying, what else could be true, right? Like, this is what I think, but I wonder if there are other options. As you said, someone sitting across the table from me would be seeing the same situation that I'm having an automatic, direction toward, seeing it a totally different way. So just, sort of playing the role of the person sitting in the skybox at a baseball game.
Yeah.
Wonder what other perspectives there might be on this. And then taking it one step further, recognizing that I have the power and the ability to choose, that there is not one way that I need to or must think about any situation. It's that I get to choose. So just, I was talking with someone the other day about how we get the opportunity to take space, and this is what that does. I'm not reacting or responding. It's a little bit more like deciding. I'm looking at what's going on, and I'm in this position where I'm saying, how do I want to respond? What do I want my action to be? maybe I don't want to take an action. So I just breathe and, walk away.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think doing that practice to yourself is so important. And ultimately it's what empowered me to take a situation that felt completely like overwhelm, completely like being out of control and having nowhere to turn, no resource to reach, like being at the bottom of a pit and not being able to get out, right?
Mhm.
Everything is business as usual around you and you feel like you're drowning. Being able to use that space is the place that I was able to sort of reshift things so that they were not so disproportionately focused on everything on the outside and more appropriately starting within, right? Like every day, starting within. So, yeah, I love that you brought that up because that is the thing that got me to the place that I'm able to bring value from my experience to help others with theirs.
Wow, that resonates so well with what I teach also about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind and how we
Mhm.
have this power to, whenever an idea comes to us, be it from our own thinking or from somebody else, we have consciously the power to choose either to accept it, to reject it, or to ignore it. Just let it
Mhm.
go. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not even going to respond. I'm just going to ignore it. Honestly, involved with what triggers us or what means a lot or what we think is a priority or important, but we still mind can only hold one thought at a time. So let
Mhm.
it be positive and let it be constructive. I love that, and it resonates so much with what I love about the human mind. That is
Mhm.
superpower indeed. So now that you work with coaching clients, tell us more about how do you work with your clients?
Yeah, so I coach people in a couple of different ways.
Mhm.
Because I have varied experience. So, one of the first things that I do when I work with a client is to get really clear on what they're working with me for, because
Mhm.
the client needs to understand that it's my role to help and support them, not to decide for them. I'm a guide, a partner, and a facilitator. So, for instance, if a person who is having some professional goals approaches me about using strategies and tools that I have to help them reach those goals, then I'm
Mhm.
going to do an assessment with them to determine the direction that they want to take. Very often, leaders like I was are realizing that there is something going on with them. They start to notice this pattern that things seem to be out of sorts in many areas of their life and work, and that it's getting more and more difficult to point a finger at this thing is at fault and that thing is at fault. And when this is the case, I am able to support an individual and guide them through their own personal work. And the place that we always start is with their thinking. Um, I am really grateful for my life coach training because one of the core pieces that I have taken away from that is how powerful and practical it can be for anyone to just learn to become aware of their thinking. We are not taught this in young years. It's not
Mhm.
something that, is taught in schools, and many families don't know. But there is a life coach that I learned from and a mentor. She has this teaching that your thoughts, your circumstances are neutral, right? And we don't necessarily agree with that. I said the word right as if it's automatic. Some people would say,
Mhm.
yeah, this is a fact and that's not a fact and all of those things. But if you just consider, like, we'll take the rule that the circumstance is neutral, whatever it is that you describe, it just is what it is. What we think about it is optional. And
Mhm.
sometimes we don't see the option there. But what we think about our circumstances is the part that we have potential to influence. When we realize that what we think determines how we feel, when you think one thought, you feel a certain way. When you think another thought, you feel a certain way. It's exactly the way that two people can encounter a circumstance and
Mm-hmm.
have two different feelings about it. Because one person is thinking a thought that causes them to feel down or perhaps dejected or sense anxiety. Someone else is thinking a thought that enables them to feel optimistic, problem solving, seeking, interested, curious, something different. And those two people are going to act completely differently based on their thinking and their feeling, and ultimately get different results. So one of my favorite things to teach people is to play around with this. And it's not a fast track, but the first thing that you start to understand is when you just notice the pattern in the way that you tend to think about your circumstances and how those tendencies
Mm-hmm.
lead to certain feelings that are directly connected to certain actions that are the reason you consistently get the results that you experience. It's like, whoa, I love this question again. What else could be true? I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking this thing about my circumstance, but what else do I think? We don't automatically jump to, oh, well, I've heard this happy, sunshiny, people call it toxic positivity thought out in the world. No, 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 that's not necessary. One of my favorite examples is when a client came to me after just 2 sessions of looking at what she thought. We're not even going to talk about what all the other people are doing. They're not here. We don't have control over them. It is us. What space do we have, right? So in this second or third session, the client came to me and she said, you noticed? What I noticed is that an individual was coming to me and I heard myself think, oh, here we go again.
Oh.
Exact words. And then before the person approached me, I thought, wait a second, I can do something about this. Instead of doing her usual lose the day pattern based on the, oh, here we go again thought, she took a different path just by noticing I'm going to keep control of my day, or it's my responsibility to make sure that we stay on track. When
Mm-hmm.
by the time that person approached her, it was like she was a completely different person for the first time ever. Almost, she didn't believe it. She didn't need to learn 10,000 steps to, control an interaction. She just she had a slightly different thought, which prompted her to feel slightly differently than she had in other instances and act differently. So that after the interaction, she went on with her day, which she usually was not able to do. So this is one of my favorite things to teach that's applicable in business and personal circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
but it's one of my favorite ways to work with people. Whether we're having personal or professional challenges, very often we are not noticing that there's more possibility available, right? And so I really enjoy being the second pair of eyes and
Mm-hmm.
being able to listen objectively and hold space for the person that I'm listening to. Just tell them what they're saying, because when it comes back to you, sometimes it's so powerful when you hear someone else say to you what you just said. And it gives you the space to be able to question, wait, why do I think about it that way? What
Mm-hmm.
do I really want to think about it? So, that's just a description of some of the things that can be possible in a coaching conversation.
I practice something very similar. Every time I notice that I'm about to think a certain way about a certain thing, I ask myself this question and my perspective shifts immediately. The question is, I'm not sure how to think about that. How many ways can I think about this situation? And it's very similar to the question you ask, what else can be true?
Mm-hmm.
There are always more than one truth to the story. And I love when you said our circumstances are neutral. Two people can look at the same thing and have completely different reactions or responses to that thing. It can trigger different emotions. The same painting, the same event, the same thing that happens can trigger a lot of different emotions depending on our state of mind, our self-image, our personal trauma, our history,
Mm-hmm.
other circumstances that are correlating with the situation. So one thing I learned a few years ago that is a very good practice is that when something happens that I usually think is bad, and I'm about to think, oh, this is bad news, I would give myself 3 days in which I would think and do my best to think and write down about any possible good that can come out of that situation. And
Mm-hmm.
it works. For 3 days, I'm postponing my anxiety. I'm postponing my stress, and I'm postponing whatever reaction I'm about to have to this situation or to these news. And I'm practicing having to look for other truths. And it works. It's really amazing.
So I think that what you just shared is such a great example because another practice that I've learned that is very empowering is the word. I use the word powerful a lot,
Mhm.
but what I really mean is empowering. Often we're looking for answers on the outside when it is us who holds the keys to create the liberty or the space or the freedom and that we need. So this gaming, right? Like we talk about gaming things, and I love to have the idea of being at play, like it's a puzzle, a quiz, an investigation, something to, be interested and curious about. It's so uplifting. And to your point, when you start to play with what's going on and diffuse some of the seriousness around it, all of a sudden the anxiety dissipates. It's like,
Mhm.
this curiosity, this playfulness is so liberating and provides so much power. And I think we just maybe left over from childhood, we naturally like we choose our game piece. I'm going to be the green, the little green marker today, or today I want to be the race car, right? Like I think that that's such a beautiful image, but also more importantly, a practice. So creating essentially games for yourself and being very playful about there's something going on here. It's a little suspicious. Maybe it's like the game of Clue that we have over here in the States where
Mhm.
we've got to figure out who did this and what was really behind it. And, you know, um, I think that that is just creating a sort of healthy space between you and the circumstance so that I
Mhm.
say to people all the time, you are not your mind. Very often we just automatically default to exactly what we think is
Mhm.
true. It is the way that it is, and so we must be overcome with the circumstance because it's horrible. And I know that there are certain issues that we could discuss and examples of things that genuinely are horrible. One of the favorite things that I love to ask my clients, though, is how does it serve you to think about the context in this way?
Mhm.
And when you think about what it's creating for you, is that what you really want? Because recognizing that you have the responsibility and the power for the position that you hold, I think it's a tough one. We want someone else to be at fault, but very often when we choose a position, it's us who chooses it. So if you are beat down and oppressed, is there something in your choosing that you do have influence over? Not
Mhm.
talking about the other people's part, just your part. Are you adopting and owning a perspective or a story that perhaps does not serve you? I know that I have been guilty of that, that I have, on behalf of all of the people who wanted to do me harm, thought things on my own and acted on my own based on those thoughts and those feelings in ways that restricted me so that nobody else had to. I did the work. And I think this is the space and the ownership that I'm talking about. When I am telling myself I'm inferior and therefore acting inferior, nobody else needs to do. There are no other bad guys. And I think that this is a good example of what I'm talking about when perhaps we're in spaces that we don't feel recognized or seen. Is it really the individuals outside of us who aren't recognizing and seeing us? Or is it because we've bought into that perspective, are owning it and acting from it? And I have played small and been, tiny and invisible and quiet in so many instances in my life because of things that I told myself that I imagined the other people felt about me. It really just all made up stories. And
Yeah.
when I figured out that I didn't need to have those stories, that I had a client or a connection who recently said, "What you believe is a lie." I thought it was really, really edgy. And the reason that I love the statement is because I don't think we realize how much control we have over what we think and how optional they are. That the majority of what we're thinking is literally just what we choose to tell ourselves. And when you think about it that way, it's like I could choose to tell myself I was a fairy and have a really happy day. It would be so much fun. So I just send blessings to everyone. And what a beautiful position to be in. So I picked something completely random and fantasy because it's uplifting.
Yeah.
And how much better is everything I'm going to do today when I am uplifted? I am having so much fun in this space of choice because, yes, things are hard. I hear people talking about the economy all the time and how
Mhm.
things are downturned. And I'm like, I don't know how feeling bad is going to help the situation. So I am choosing to focus on some things that are positive while
Wow.
I'm working hard.
I love this attitude. And I think, again, this is a question of awareness because most people are wired to think that it's easier to play the victim, and they're
Hmm.
doing it subconsciously because they don't know the amount of power they have over the situation. Just once they take responsibility and say, what can I do to make things better? How can my thinking shape another solution, shape another reality? Instead of playing the victim and blaming something else, which is much easier to do. But I think people are doing that because they lack awareness of the amount of power they have over their thinking. And again, thinking would cause the feeling if we are emotionally involved with that thought, and the
Hmm.
feeling will cause the action, whether it is to act, to react, to respond, or to just let it go and do something else that is better and empowering for your life. And the actions will obviously trigger the results that will shape the rest of our lives. So it all starts with awareness once again.
Yes, 100%. I love the simple, simple thought that everything around me, every place I encounter is subject to my influence.
Hmm.
In any interaction, I bring a part of it. So
Yes.
I always have some control,
Hmm.
not over the other individual, but by just showing up differently, that individual must respond differently. Or the overall outcome will always be different. And I'll just use a simple interaction as an example. If two people are in any type of a disagreement,
Hmm.
but one person intentionally chooses agreement, like just decides, I'm not going to disagree with you. We can't fight if I don't disagree. It doesn't mean I have to buy your product or agree with your idea or join your, I said agree, but join your team, um, get in the car and go away with you. But I
Hmm.
could just choose to not disagree. The entire interaction is different because I'm showing up saying, I don't need to make my point right.
Yeah.
Your point can be right. I accept that your point is right to you already. I don't even know what your point is. It's the one that you think.
It's like
And I
saying,
don't, yeah,
I acknowledge that you do have another perspective that I cannot see yet. And it makes
yes.
total sense.
And I surrender the need to make you see mine.
Hmm.
Now, if you showed up as the person who was willing to surrender and also open to entertaining whatever it is about my perspective that you wanted to, learn, then that would totally change the dynamic. But I don't have to fight with anyone. I don't need to be in disagreement with anyone. I can have peace with everyone. And I don't mean to overgeneralize this to say that I'm okay with everything. That's really not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how sometimes in our professional context, we can have really, really difficult exchanges with people that we work with. I
Hmm.
know that as a leader, I used a tremendous amount of self-control. Um, and, you know, I just felt like it's not about who agrees with me. It's not about who thinks I'm right or how many people I can get to change their ideas. Like I recognize that these other individuals are whole people who have a set of experiences and, persuasions that make them who they are.
Hmm.
So, my job is not to force them to see my way. Now, if they're open to that, then that would be great. But it just create so much space and ability for peace and progress, and that's kind of what I'm always motivated for. Back to that question that I ask clients about what serves you, then the next question I would ask is, how does it serve us? Like, are we looking to move forward? Because if I dig my toes in the ground on this and refuse to move, pretty sure we're not going anywhere. You're not going to be able to drag me. Pretty heavy. We're going to just stay stuck. And I usually, when I was leading teams in school, the main thing that I would say is I'll do anything to get us to move forward. Where can we find a point of agreement so that we could start moving forward? We usually make better progress when we're moving anyway. So let's just figure out what we share and work on that part. Generally speaking, we're able to make progress and keep moving. So, yeah, I think agreement is really powerful.
It is indeed. Oh, Monique, I really love your way of thinking and your way of explaining in such simple terms. The amount of expertise that you have is so needed right now in all areas, actually, professional, personal relationships, even health and well-being. It's really crucial to learn about shifting perspectives and gaining more awareness and practicing noticing. So that being said, how can people find you, and what do you offer at the moment? Do you have a course or an online program?
Oh, thanks so much for asking that. So, the first thing that I want to share with people is that I am Moneke Fields, Fields. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Monique Fields. You can find me on Instagram, Monique Fields. You can find me on TikTok as Dr. Monique Fields, because there are other Moniques in the world. Easy to find and follow in all of those places. And you can also find me at highyieldcoaching.com. I am a personal coach, but I am also a business coach. So bringing these different modalities that we've discussed, I provide individual one-on-one coaching and group coaching. Especially, I love to work with small business owners and entrepreneurs who are looking to work through some of the challenges that they face and grow and scale their businesses. So I don't have courses, so to speak, but the one other thing that I would share is that if individuals want to know how to grow their business or spread their message and benefit their cause with podcasting, this is a new thing that I'm onto that I intend to help everybody who, like me, needs to reach people who just need a little bit of help. So that's what I have to share.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Monique. And I will make sure I'll add all the details about where to find you in the description of this episode. And to finish with, is there any last piece of advice that you want your future clients and our listeners to have?
I love this opportunity. Let me think. I would say that one of the most compelling things that we have all heard, and I believe it's Nelson Mandela who says that we should be the change that we want to see in the world. I hope I've attributed that right. It could have been Mother Teresa. Either way, that is a phrase that could so easily be underestimated. I think that the work of being who you intend to be, who you desire to be, and I see so many people pointing fingers and attributing everything that needs to be repaired, excuse me, to folks outside of themselves. And I just can't place enough emphasis on how everything around us is improved when we are the absolute best that we can be. Everything changes. And so whether a person is, an at-home mom or a solopreneur or perhaps the leader of a company, you would not believe how much improvement is possible in the places that we want to see change by literally showing up and being the example of what's possible. That's what I commit all of my energy to. And then my second best passion is to turn around and share that willingly with anybody who is open to accepting it, because we're usually pretty curious about others. So when people ask you, what it is that you do, then share a little bit of how you stay centered, how you stay focused and really align with the purpose and the contribution that you intend to make in the world. And that, I believe, would have more effect than any formal program that we could probably identify as, a way to make change around us. So that's my advice. Be the
Thank
best
you
you
so
could be.
much. That's such good advice. Thank you again, Monique, for being an amazing guest in the Success Catalyst podcast. And thank you, everyone who's been listening. I will make sure again to put all your details in the episode description. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you again in the next episode.
Thank you.